From our studio located in Madison, New Jersey, this is Real Good News. Hi, and welcome to Real Good News. On today's show, Steve Lubetkin will interview former Business Week chief correspondent Joseph Weber on the future of journalism. And Alan Swanson will examine due process in America. And later on, we will visit to Martha's Vineyard, a vacation paradise off the coast of Massachusetts that is celebrating the 50th anniversary of the first summer blockbuster released on June 21st, back in 1975. But first, here is Steve Lubetkin.
Thanks, Diane. The state of American journalism is pretty challenged these days. Recently, we had the opportunity to talk with two experts on the subject of the state of American journalism. Joe Weber, who's a veteran correspondent for Business Week and a professor emeritus of journalism from the University of Nebraska, and Mark Pfeiffer, who is a public affairs fellow at the Blaustein School at Rutgers University. Mark's recently written a report on the future of journalism in New Jersey. Here are some excerpts from our conversations with Joe and Mark. The free press in the United States is facing a superstorm of challenges, from declining readership of print news publications to the loss of advertising revenue to online platforms. Joining us to talk about the state of American journalism is Joe Weber, who most recently was the Jerry and Carla Hughes Professor of News Editorial at the College of Journalism and Mass Communications at the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. Joe's also been a visiting professor at Shanghai University of Finance and Economics and was with Business Week magazine for more than 2 decades, concluding as chief of correspondence there. I should add, Joe has solid New Jersey roots, beginning his journalism career amidst the smell of ink and newsprint at the Home News in New Brunswick, New Jersey in the 1970s. Joe, thanks for joining us on the program today.
Happy to be with you, Steve.
What are the consequences of this decline in journalism? I mean, it has some real tangible impact on how people think, how people make decisions, what they understand about what reality is.
I mean, the bottom line is that the distribution of accurate, fair, thorough, and balanced news in the U.S. these days is in terrible shape, nationally and locally. We've had so many deaths of newspapers that lots of people are simply denied access to local news. And that's vital for our democracy on the local level and beyond. And as of 2 years ago, there were about 6,000 newspapers left, down from about 8,900. So 1/3 had disappeared. We have news deserts all over the country, places where people can get no local news or, for that matter, national news unless they go on the internet. The impact has been just profound on a local level.
With the Star-Ledger ending its print edition and the Jersey Journal shutting down, New Jersey's media landscape is changing fast. But does the decline of print mean the end of local journalism? In a new report from the Blaustein School at Rutgers University called The Future of New Jersey Journalism, Evolution, Not Extinction, senior policy fellow Mark Pfeiffer discusses these shifts and what they mean for the future of news. And you can download a copy of Mark's report by scanning the QR code on the screen or visiting the URL you see below it.
Your report stirred up a lot of interest and certainly got my attention. You say that the journalism landscape in New Jersey is evolving, but it's not going extinct, even in the face of some print publications shutting down their print editions. Why do you think it's an evolution and not a death knell?
I think digital technology has changed so many things in our culture and lives. And this is just one area that it's affecting. Social media has had its impact on our lives and how we do things. And it's everything internet has affected journalism. It's affected it in ways people did not foresee. A Jersey native, Craig Newmark, 30 years ago, invented Craigslist. And most people many people today on the internet have heard of Craigslist, and it's got its start advertising, doing classified ads, what were classified ads in newspapers, and effectively gutted most classified ads in newspapers. Then people invented how to put banner ads on websites. And then Google invented its way of providing advertising where people bid on types of websites, and they bid so much money or cents per impression, cents per view of people looking at advertising. That changed how newspapers had been working for decades. So some people argue they've been slow to adapt. I think there's something to be said for that because nobody saw where things were going to go. So we are seeing an evolution, and that evolution creates some change. It creates economic changes that we're seeing as more and more people are getting their news digitally, be it on a desktop computer, a laptop, a tablet, or their phone. Not as many people are buying paper newspapers anymore. And we've seen here's what prompted my report was New Jersey Advance effectively closing down several of its newspapers, particularly the Star Ledger. And basically they're putting a stake in the ground saying that the future of news consumption is on digital devices.
I guess the thing that concerns me, though, is you have what was once the largest newspaper in New Jersey by circulation, with probably close to 500,000 daily subscribers or daily issues, no longer having either the print publication or having the team of reporters with the resources to cover things in the depth and with the detail that they used to be able to cover things.
So there's two elements to that. Let's do the first one, and then you may have to remind me to come back to the reporter issue. So the bigger picture one is that people are getting news differently today. We've got two generations and 2.5 generations, I suppose. Part of Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z did not grow up with newspapers. They grew up getting their news through digital devices. Now, how they consumed it, what news they consumed is a really interesting separate story, because you had Facebook with its news feed basically taking news from news producers' websites. They would take press releases. They would take what newspapers would put on their website and grab those. And the people producing news weren't getting paid for that. Right? The newspapers weren't getting a lot of revenue. Their advertising was taken up by those websites, particularly Facebook and Google. And then in the last 15 years, we've seen digital media, led now by TikTok, started by YouTube, with Instagram in the middle, and they're all working now to try to maximize the number of eyeballs that get to them. And that's where people are consuming news. So not only has the circulation in newspapers dropped, all right, they're now counting eyeballs and number of clicks to their websites as a way of doing circulation. We don't see a lot of that publicly. So we don't really see the internal metrics of how well they're doing. But there's still a lot of people picking up interested in news and just getting it in many ways. I think what the Advance is doing, I think what we will see Gannett doing, we'll see the other chains doing it as well, that they are all moving towards some type of digital delivery. And probably in 5 years, most, except for some niche type newspapers, will be digital.
What is the specific consequence for people in terms of local news? If you don't have a local newspaper covering local government and local businesses, what will people be missing that they may not even realize they're missing?
I'll give you an example of that. So I live in Summit County, Colorado. We are blessed with a daily paper here. It's a free paper, but it's a daily paper. And that paper covers local stuff intensively. So for instance, in one of the towns nearby, a town called Dillon, they had a recall election. It was really important for people in that town to read what the incumbent politicians were saying, as well as those who were reelected or elected anew to their positions. There's a big issue in that town in terms of development. A developer wants to come in and create a huge development. That sort of thing has to be covered, has to be followed. If that's not followed, then basically it's up to the politicians to do whatever they want to do. The public will really have no say other than by going to council meetings and such, which very few people have the time to do. So I think it would be a huge loss if we did not have this daily paper here in Summit County. Fortunately, we do.
It's almost as if the local politicians, knowing that they're not being covered in some areas, will go ahead and do things that they might not think of doing if there was public coverage of what they're doing.
Steve, you are thinking like a reporter now. One of the things that I learned from my earliest days in newspapering was to hold everything up to a degree of skepticism. When you're dealing with politicians, the question is always self-interest. Why are they in that business? Why are they doing that? Are they doing it to help themselves? Or are they doing it for the public good? And you will see politicians who do it for the public good, and you will see politicians who do it for ego and money. So, the challenge is that the politicians who do it for ego and money could see great opportunity in usurping the proprieties of democracy, if you will, and enriching themselves. And if there is no check on that in terms of local journalists reporting on them, there's no real oversight other than, judicial authorities and so on. And, they need local news to alert them to what's going on in the local towns. So the system really loses overall. I mean, there's a reason that the media is called the fourth estate, right? I mean, the idea is that we can serve as a check. We're not elected, we're not appointed, we're not official, but we can serve a check on bad governance and bad oversight. And if that function goes away, the public loses.
You can see the complete interviews with Joe Weber and Mark Pfeiffer at our news website, statebroadcastnews.com. I'm Steve Lubetkin here in Cherry Hill. Back to you, Diane.
And now, Alan Swanson examines due process in America.
On these commentaries, I have stressed the importance of having the facts before making judgments about issues. Why? Because we live in a time of considerable challenge when it comes to knowing just what the facts are on any issue. One issue that we are hearing a great deal about these days is due process of law. We hear all kinds of claims regarding due process. So what exactly is it? Where do we find it? And are the people that we're seeing being deported entitled to this protection? Let's start with the definition. Due process is contained in our Constitution, in both the 5th and the 14th Amendments. So let's take a look. The 5th Amendment includes the following: no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. The 14th Amendment includes very similar language, only it's more state-related. It states, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the law. So, who exactly is covered by these portions of the Constitution? The late Justice of the Supreme Court, John Paul Stevens, said the following in a unanimous Supreme Court decision from 1976. I quote, "There are literally millions of aliens within the jurisdiction of the United States. The 5th Amendment, as well as the 14th Amendment, protects every one of these persons from deprivation of life, liberty, or property without due process of law." End quote. What this means is, if your feet are planted in the United States, you are to be granted due process of law prior to being deprived of your liberty. It would appear to be simple. However, the current administration has made several arguments that they believe override or allow for the suspension of due process prior to the deportations. These arguments include the following. 1, no one would ever be deported if every individual's case needed to go before a court. The position of this current administration is that this would require millions of trials. The counter-argument to this is that due process does not necessarily mean a trial. There are reviews by legal authorities that do not require a trial. As the Supreme Court recently stated, I quote, detainees are entitled to notice and opportunity to be heard appropriate to the nature of the case. End quote. There are ongoing cases before the courts that are likely going to provide much more clarification and definite answers to this question. The second argument by the administration is the invocation of the 1798 Aliens Enemies Act. This is cited as a reason for the administration can deport immigrants who are not here legally. This act is a sweeping wartime authority that allows deportation of non-citizens without going before a federal or immigration judge. Now, the counter-argument is that this act can only apply during a time of war. The last time it was used was during the now infamous incarceration of even citizens of Japanese ancestry during World War II. The action by Democratic President Franklin Roosevelt has been widely criticized, and the result was financial damages being awarded to survivors through the Civil Liberties Act of 1988. The act also was intended with the following quote, to discourage the occurrence of similar injustices and violations of civil liberties in the future, end quote. A third argument by the current administration is that they are deporting only criminals and foreign gangs. The counter-argument is that this is simply not the case, since we have seen many examples of students, restaurant and farm workers being rounded up and detained. And we see videos of masked armed ICE and Homeland Security personnel detaining people on the street and asking for their papers. I could continue with many more examples of legal arguments from both sides. And we're seeing these all every day in the news. The problem is, this issue is so heavily clouded by ideology and politics that a rational discussion is almost impossible. What I am pointing out is, there are arguments that need to be resolved with unbiased legal and general debate. If we continue dismissing the facts, the legal debates, and do not adhere to the judiciary discussions and rulings, we are going to increase the divisiveness and infringe on the rights of non-citizens and likely citizens as well. We all need to take a step back from the rhetoric, the disinformation, and make sure our decisions on issues are based on facts, because facts matter. This is Alan Swanson. Thank you for watching.
Martha's Vineyard is buzzing with activity as the island celebrates the 50th anniversary of Jaws, the iconic 1975 thriller filmed largely on its shores. Local businesses are checking out storefronts with shark-themed decorations, while town officials finalize logistics for the multi-day celebration that began on June 19th. Edgartown was famously transformed into the fictional Amity Island for the film. All around town, you'll find Jaws-themed signage and decorations, some hidden in plain sight, as the community gears up with banners, commemorative displays, and merchandise popping all over. Over in Vineyard Haven, the Martha's Vineyard Museum has opened its Jaws at 50 exhibit. Through vivid displays of photographs, oral histories, original art, and authentic movie props. The exhibit tells the story of how the island became an unforgettable backdrop for one of the most iconic films ever made. From the mechanical shark Bruce to early storyboards and portraits of locals who joined the crew. The museum offers a rich, behind-the-scenes look at the movie's production. What makes the exhibit especially unique is its mix of pop culture and science. Visitors can explore a full-scale replica of the orca's cabin and stand in front of the Amity Island Welcomes You sign, and learn how Jaws reshaped the island's identity. A gallery developed with the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy adds depth, shifting focus to real shark behavior, ocean ecosystems, and conservation. All across the island, restaurants and shops are rolling out themed menus and souvenirs. Even the local library is joining in, hosting Jaws-themed events for kids. A full-scale replica of the orca was spotted at Oak Bluffs Marina. Built by marine carpenter Michael Sterling over nearly a decade, the boat began its journey as a 1960s Maine lobster vessel before being transformed into a stunning tribute to the original. The orca will continue its tour to Edgartown and Menemsha later this week. But for now, this legendary boat is back in familiar waters. At the Edgartown Movie Theater, the recent Sunday evening screening of Jaws drew a crowd of over 150 people, many who were seeing the movie for the first time, and the entire audience rose to their feet and cheered at the climax of the movie. Meanwhile, fans are enjoying the sun and visiting key filming locations, from the iconic Jaws Bridge to the harbors, beaches, and quiet streets seen in the film. Recreating scenes and snapping photos, locals say interest in these landmarks has surged in the lead up to the anniversary. To meet the growing demand, several tour companies are offering Jaws-themed guided experiences. Walking tours through Edgartown and van tours around the island bring visitors to familiar sights, while guides share filming secrets, trivia, and stories from the summer that a young Steven Spielberg came to town. The Amity Homecoming Weekend featured panel discussions, public art, and outdoor screenings. For Martha's Vineyard, the 50th anniversary of Jaws is a celebration of the summer that locals became extras, fishermen became crew members, and a quiet New England town was cast in a role that would live on for generations. As we close out this episode, we take a look at Edgartown Harbor and the Chappaquiddick Ferry on a foggy New England morning. We're off for the July 4th holiday, so we will see you on our next episode on July 19th. Until then, for Real Good News, I'm Diane Smith-Kirsh, with a reminder that real good news is worth sharing. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the presenters and contributors. While we support a diversity of perspectives, they may not reflect the views of the entire team. We encourage open dialogue and welcome differing viewpoints. Real Good News is produced by Mortonveld Productions. For Real Good News, I'm Diane Kirsh.